Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this fourth and final edition of Housing, a Gothic Tale, community conversation series where the Welcome Home Atlanta team, powered by Keller Williams First Atlanta, has partnered with Aurora Theatre in Lawrenceville, currently producing Feeding Beatrice by Kirsten, Greenidge. So what we have been doing over the last several weeks is engaging with community leaders and thought leaders, advocates, folks who have a tremendous amount of information to share with us in their specific lanes and fields as it relates to housing. And today is no different. We are so lucky to have Lejla Prljaca, and I'm sure I did not say it as beautifully as you can. I'm going to give you the opportunity to say that for everyone. And she is the executive director of the Gwinnett Housing Corporation. So welcome to this conversation, Laila. I would love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do, maybe what got you to this point in terms of how you've intersected with housing in Gwinnett, and then I'll give a little bit of framework for the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I am the executive director of Gwinnett Housing Corporation. We are a nonprofit affordable housing development organization in Gwinnett County, and we really focus on creating housing opportunities for when we say low-income families, those are typically families that earn between 50% of the area median income up to 80% of the area median income. So we acquire, develop, and manage rental and units for homeownership. We have started with our nonprofit work about 12 years ago, and we had like a pot of money, $200,000 to invest, and we ended up leveraging that with $80 million in housing development activity in Gwinnett County. Yes, so we have a really robust homeownership program. We have a great transitional housing program for families experiencing homelessness. And I mean, we've just seen so many families, succeed. And this is something that's really important to me, especially the homeownership. It's dear to my heart. We see so many families who want to live in Gwinnett, whose children go to school in Gwinnett, and they just want to be able to, set their roots in Gwinnett County and call it home. So I'm glad that we can provide that opportunity for them.
I love that. And that's incredible just to see, and even just hearing rather, the almost that exponential partnership or the power of the funds that you've been able to really funnel and connect with as organizations, as government dollars, as all of those things come together to support these efforts. That's so heartening to hear. And as we all know, well, maybe some of our patrons don't know, Gwinnett is the most diverse county in the Southeast. There are more nationalities represented in Gwinnett than anywhere else, which is tremendous. And so as we're talking about housing, we're also looking through the lens of equity and inclusion and ultimately belonging. So what we're going to do, Laila, in just framing this conversation is this is the tail end of our 4-part series. And as I was explaining to you yesterday when we connected, we've been looking at these conversations through the lenses of the 5 major systems of a home and how that relates to the timeline when we're talking about housing. So our very first episode, if you think about roof and the foundation, that's the structure of a house, right? So the scaffolding of the past, what got us to where we are now. And then we spent a couple of episodes discussing the current energy of what's going on in the present. And I liken that to electricity and plumbing in a home because of the things that are flowing around and providing energy. And this last episode, we want to do a little bit of future casting. We can absolutely talk about what's happening in the present, in the past, but I think of your HVAC system, what's creating a very comfortable temperature for you. So things that we can do as those of us that are in real estate or in advocacy positions, in other lanes adjacent to housing or specifically related to housing, in preparing not only potential clients and consumers, but also a general public in terms of what we can do and learn to propel housing forward in a way that is truly equitable for everyone, that does truly provide affordable housing options for everyone, and really is conscientious about helping to build true integrated communities on all levels. So that'll be kind of the scope of our conversation today. And you got to see Feeding Beatrice last week, as did I. So I would love actually just to take a few seconds and just get your thoughts, your feedback from the show, what that experience was like watching it.
Absolutely. One of the parts of that play that really resonated with me is the racial integration of neighborhoods. Obviously, that's been a contentious point in American history, since beginning. And I know that you all have addressed redlining and points in the events in the past that have
Right.
really prevented integration of racial integration of neighborhoods. What has kind of struck me right now is, and this is a national, phenomena, that in theory, all of us, vast majority of Americans, are in favor of diverse neighborhoods, but the studies show that once a percentage of minority-owned homes, once it reaches, I believe it's 15%, that you definitely see some of the white flight starting to happen.
Right.
And from the equity standpoint, what that does have an effect on that overall economy is that when a significant segment of the population leaves, sometimes investment leaves with it, and the market for the remaining subdivision or the neighborhood shrinks, which means the prices do start to go down. So it's kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
So that's what, when all of the attention from the neighbors and from Beatrice, how long are you going to stay here? Just the kind of fear of the unknown, that now there's an African-American family in their community. I definitely see that happening even today in our communities. And I think it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. Gwinnett County overall, it's very diverse. But I've yet to see truly integrated neighborhoods, racially integrated neighborhoods.
As opposed to things that sort of become organic boroughs, right? I mean, if you think of like New York City or Chicago, it's very true, I think, everywhere, that yes, there may be in the entirety of a particular perimeter, whether it's a city limit or a county limit, there's quote unquote diversity, but are we fully integrated within our communities, or are we sort of, hovering within our own little enclaves for a variety of reasons, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
And it shouldn't be, people do sometimes have a preference to live along people who look like them. And this is across all races. But when the problem presents itself is that when a certain demographic is now facing barriers, so there's really not much choice but to live in a certain neighborhood. And then, the effect just gets exacerbated throughout the community. So it's not just housing, but now our schools become segregated. And to give you a live example, in Gwinnett County, when I lived in Norcross, it was a Title I school, elementary school, and it was 4% white. Literally 2 miles down the road was another elementary school that was at that time 90% white. And we're talking just a few years ago.
Yeah.
So 4% white and 90% white. And there were also different, the Title I school was also the beautiful part of it. Yes, it was a Title I school, but there were 80 languages spoken. And that's the school that my children went to. And the teachers were fantastic. And the administrators, the teachers would stay in the school until 8, 9 p.m. sometimes, working with the students, especially for those that English was second language. And it was just such a beautiful opportunity. And for me, looking at it as a parent for my child, to have that kind of cultural exposure. I mean, honestly, some people pay a lot of money for that kind of experience in private academy schools, for that kind of cultural exposure. But the overall perspective is that this is a somewhat inferior school, if we're truly honest with ourselves.
It's so crazy.
But it's just not. I mean, the performance, the students are performing equally, but there's definitely effects of things that are outside the school's scope that might affect the scores. So yes, that's why it is important for us to look at neighborhoods and integration, because it does have a compounding effect on the society.
Thank you for sharing that. And so while we're on that, I would love to pick your brain about how do we go about doing that? I know it's like a big ball of challenges, but from your perspective and in your position in Gwinnett, and with any other thoughts about partners or government intersections or private enterprises, whatever that is, how do we go about rectifying that and finding a degree of balance? I mean, I know part of it is education for sure. A lot of it is also unraveling myths about a variety of things that seem to compound and cloud a general consumer's perspective of what, like we were speaking about yesterday, affordable housing. There's probably a lot of misinformation that floats out around that particular topic. So I would just love to figure out from you, your own thoughts and perspectives from being boots on the ground. How do we start addressing some of these things, both now and in the future?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we definitely can do is just look at our the land use. Currently, in the United States, 75% of the land is zoned for single family homes. And so what ends up happening is that, apartments are typically clustered in one part of the town or one part of the county. And nothing that there's wrong with apartments, but renters are typically more transient than the homeowners. So of course, that's going to have effect on the schools when you have 80% rental rates, as opposed to a school district that has mostly single family homes that are owner occupied. And that kind of land use, and especially in the suburbs in Metro Atlanta, 10, 15 years ago, they used to say Metro Atlanta is like a poster child of how not to do urban planning because
Exactly.
urban sprawl has happened. So, but it's given us a lot to learn from and to study. And the integration, I think it's very important to look at zoning beyond single family homes and multifamily rental. That's that missing middle zoning that typically in the suburbs we don't get to see. Infill housing or duplex style home ownership units, homes that are typically more affordable as a stepping stone, as a first home for the first time home buyers, so they can get into that housing market. So that's one, is the land use, the restrictive zoning that does not really allow for a lot of creativity in the housing construction. What we're trying to do is really look at the affordability component of it.
Right.
And to me, why is that important for us, for everybody in the society? 50% of renters in Gwinnett County are cost burdened. And that means they're paying more than a third of their income towards housing. The same for the homeowners. About a third of our homeowners are cost burdened. So when we look at those numbers, that means that their discretionary income is limited. And where does the discretionary income go towards? It goes towards patronizing local businesses.
Exactly.
Visiting a hair salon, or eating dinner, or taking family out
to the theater.
Or theater, absolutely. So the less discretionary spending there is in the community, because if vast majority of the population spends the big chunk of their income on housing, they really don't have that much left. And studies do show the higher the inaffordability, it slows down the economic growth. So it does affect all of us. And to be realistic, we're always going to have the workforce. We're always going to have, even sometimes what's considered the working poor, people who serve lunches, cafeteria, who even take care of our children for $9 an hour. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
For $9 an hour, or our parents at maybe $10 an hour.
Yeah.
They're just not going to be able to afford market housing.
Sure.
This is something that we are hoping to assist with our programs. And obviously, we keep our rents affordable for the workforce, for the workforce housing that we provide. But for me, a big problem right now that we are seeing in Gwinnett County and really across the country is the home ownership is really is disappearing as that American dream.
Right.
And what is happening is there are multiple reasons for it, right? From the supply chain issues to the housing crash that left a lot of construction companies out of business, and they never came back. But right now, the median sales price in Gwinnett County has increased by 25%. We are seeing an influx of the population from other states where they might have sold their homes, and now they come in with a lot of cash, and they're making the current population less competitive. And I just read an article in Bloomberg where there's currently $85 billion was raised by hedge funds, pension funds, to create build to rent. And
we're seeing them crop up all over.
Absolutely. It's happening everywhere across the country, not just, here in Metro Atlanta. And what that does is really diverts the construction resources away from
Correct.
homes meant for home ownership. Even typical home builders like Pulte, they are now working for these hedge funds to build these homes to rent. And talking about equity, how does one climb the socioeconomic ladder in their life? And home ownership has traditionally been that number one most reliable route, is to build that intergenerational wealth. And right now, an average American is struggling more and more to be able to break even into the market. And I don't know if you've heard from other realtors, but single family homes right now, when they get listed, we monitor the market very closely. 60 offers.
Oh yeah. I mean, we just had a listing. Exactly. We had a listing of a two-story townhome in technically Marietta, but it's closer to Kennesaw, earlier in January. Within, I'd say 48 hours, we had 20 offers on the home for our seller. And that's typical. It's because we are in that inventory shortage for sure. A typical balanced market would be 6 months of inventory if nothing new onboarded and you worked all the way through that. We're at 0.8 right now, which is just wild.
In Gwinnett County, and I have some of the numbers that I can pull up, but the vast majority of these homes no starter homes are being built, period, in Gwinnett County, for example. And the ones that are being sold, they are getting cash offers, and the clients that we serve can't compete with that. Vast majority of our clients are earning 80% of the area median income, so they do qualify for mortgage. They have steady jobs, they have savings, but they might have an FHA loan, for example. And right now, the sellers having options to go with cash buyers, they're just not even considering them. How does that contribute to the inequity? Is that it really it widens that gap between the haves and have-nots, and that inequality keeps widening. Those of us who are homeowners, we are seeing our equity grow. Like I said, appreciation, they say, I think in Metro Atlanta, for an average homeowner was $50,000 in 1 year.
Absolutely.
But so that wealth is growing for those who already own property, but those who do not, they're remaining stagnant, and they just cannot break into the market.
Correct.
So what can be done about that is definitely, there are tools at government's disposal. They can create land bank authorities, and they can go in a very aggressive land acquisition strategy to acquire as much land earmarked for home ownership for first-time home buyers, for example. We have a similar program. We have 60 homes currently under construction in Gwinnett County. And those are going to be specifically for first-time home buyers.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yes. So we're excited, but it needs to be on a much larger scale.
Agreed. Do you work with any clients that qualify for USDA loans?
No, we have not come across any.
Got it. Because that's another tool that some people are not fully aware of, because if it depends on how far you are from what's considered kind of the core metropolitan area of any given city. But there are areas and not just tracts of land, usually with homes that have been, some kind of improvement is on the land that already exists. But if it's in a certain area of a county or so far away from a city center, it could qualify for a USDA loan, which is a no money down loan. It's almost similar to what a VA loan can do for you. And so there have been, again, it's not a silver bullet by any means, because you also have to think, if I'm living further away, I'm probably further away from my job, maybe further away from schools. So it doesn't necessarily solve other issues in a client's life, but there could be an opportunity if transportation wasn't a barrier for a variety of folks. That is something that could be a possibility. I can certainly send you some more information on that.
Please do.
And then what you're speaking to is so true with this widening gap. And the truth is, based on forecasts, it doesn't look like it's going to be turning around anytime soon. what happened, as you mentioned, when the economy tanked in 07, 08, we had an abundance of homes. A lot of these builders went out of business and never got the chance to come back into the market as players. And we did not, and I say collectively, we as local jurisdictions, state jurisdictions, and even through the federal lens, we did not do a good job of looking into the future. We were worried about the here and now. And I think someone should have had the audacity to say, wait a minute, why are our noses down in the moment when the truth is we know it's not going to stay like this. We know that the buying pool is going to increase simply because of the number of millennials that have been born. Because if you look back at the birth rates, mid 70s, they dropped off. By the end of the 70s, around 1980, they spiked up again. So if you literally just think that demographics are destiny and you follow that trajectory, that should have told someone how to help plan for what's available now. And so the truth is we have more families that are viable and able to buy, and many of us are living longer as well. And so all these compounding just human issues, I feel like a lot of us have missed the boat when all this planning should have happened years ago. And it's just so hard to play catch up. And who's the people that are hurting the most are the ones that are caught in the middle or on the tail end of something because of some type of income differential. It's usually the determining factor, right? So you're speaking such truth, which is really, really great and important. I wanted to proffer one thing too. We have heard of some really interesting, maybe not models, but some interesting situations where people are determining, look, I'm not going to wait for any particular way that my family looks in order to start buying a home. There was a great article that I'll have to send you about a single mom with a couple of children who has just like one of her best friends is also a single mother with children. They decided to buy a house together.
Yes.
And it ended up being, it was a multi-living situation where the house had already been subdivided into a couple of units. So then they can also rent out a couple of those spaces for people that are in the process of needing certainly a safe place to stay, but in the process of moving towards their own degree of ownership. So I also think that could be something for people to consider, that there are all kinds of different ways to have joint tenancy on a title.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be a quote unquote traditional sort of family.
Yes.
And that may not be the route to go for everyone, but that could also be a way to up the ante in terms of buying power and viability for certain families, or however you want to sort of create your little atomic versions of families together. So just thinking of creative strategies, I think that's another thing to throw in the arena for sure.
Absolutely. This is the time to be creative because obviously the products that we have right now, this is just not giving home buyers enough options.
Agreed.
And, it is interesting to see, private sector reacting to it. Are you familiar with pad split? That was their,
right.
They divide up the house. This is more for rental, more as a temporary situation, but take a single family home, divide it up for several renters so they can share that cost. And it's meant for a temporary basis.
Exactly.
It is a really much more affordable, safer alternative to living in an extended stay.
Right. Agreed.
So, and, we're even starting to look into manufactured housing and, modular housing. We're going to be visiting a factory in Baxley, Georgia, because I think also that's going to be the future for the development. It'd definitely be more affordable. I think the sad part about it is not to kind of reminisce what could have happened, but when the housing, every time that a disaster happens, just like a housing crash, I always look at it, this is an opportunity. And you're absolutely right. The federal response was too short-sighted, too little, and too late. The neighborhood civilization program, that was truly an opportunity to get as many of these foreclosed properties into the hands of the home buyers, and or to refinance the loans so that the foreclosures would not be that significant. But what has happened instead is it was handed over to the Wall Street, and that's when the securitization, they allowed securitization of single family homes as a portfolio for the first time ever. And that was really the start of all of the Wall Street investment in these single family homes that have traditionally been meant for homeownership.
Exactly.
And that's, I think we see that, a lot of money chasing these deals, 85 billion, like I just mentioned.
Oh, correct. It's wild out in these streets, particularly with investors, because there is no consideration for primary residency.
Yes.
And it's not just even on the hedge fund side of things. It's also, individual investors. And the idea of it, sort of the thought of it, absolutely makes sense, because we know the return on housing, the appreciation of housing is a great investment. That's why we do what we do and try to get as many people into homes. But when there is such a disparity between, a particular investor holding onto 10 or 12 or 15 properties to maximize some kind of investment growth, and there are the same, if not more, families that need a home, just one, you start having those questions of, something's not right here, like something.
Absolutely.
Right. And again, it's very difficult for me to impose any kind of moral sensibility on someone else. It's not my job to do that. But my hope is that there is an awakening. There's just a softening of a sensibility of, wait a minute. Okay. By me offloading one or two of my properties, if I have multiples, is it really going to have an overall impact on for many folks, it's just passive income, right? Is it really going to terribly alter my investment, my portfolio, whatever the case might be? Could I let a couple of those back into almost like letting a fish go back into the water, right? Because that would be a tremendous help to the market right now. Again, Absolutely. It's not going to alleviate, it's not a kill all kind of situation, but that would certainly be helpful if there was just a little bit of just sharing.
Yes. And, people get stuck on one solution. And this
Agreed.
is such a complex problem that it really is going to take, attacking it from several different
Agreed.
fronts. So, people get overwhelmed when it's presented as this, problem that absolutely cannot be addressed in our lifetime, but it can, and it's just accumulation of smaller steps. What concerns me is that the rents, for example, in Gwinnett County have gone just in the last 10 years. An average rent, it has gone up from $800 to over $1,500.
Wow.
So that is, almost doubling in just 10 years.
And wages have not followed suit.
Yes. And what it's doing is it's really causing a lot more families, but the wages have not kept up, right?
Exactly.
So that cost burden is going up. And it really, something that is often not measured is the housing insecurity. And in Gwinnett specifically, we're seeing housing insecurity demonstrates itself with the reliance on extended stays.
Yeah.
Our team did a study 3 years ago, and we visited the city of Norcross extended stays. They have the highest concentration. And we knew families were using it as nonprofits who serve precariously housed families. But when we did a study, even we were shocked by the number. And we did this in partnership with UGA, and it got national attention. We found 84% of the respondents in those extended stays use it as a place of residence.
Oh my God.
A fifth of them have been there for 5 years plus. Yes. And they're paying upwards to $2,000 to $2,500 a month for a 200 square foot room.
For a hotel room.
Absolutely, for a hotel room. 84%. So we're estimating roughly there are probably 10,000 families who are working. You see school buses picking up the children. And even though they don't consider themselves homeless, they all have said in the last 12 months, we would ask them, have you spent the night in the car or with a friend? They said yes. Wow. So they go in and out of literal homelessness. And, we looked at the barriers, again, talking about equity. Forget home ownership. How do we get you into permanent, safe housing? The largest part is they have to make 3 times that rent. And the rent, like I said, has almost doubled in the last 10 years.
Right.
And they have to have deposit, first month's rent, last month's rent. So you basically have to have like $5,000 to move in.
Exactly.
And you have to
have it's a non-starter.
Yes, it's a non-starter. And of course, they would not be living in extended stays if their credit was perfect. So a lot of these problems, and I'm worried that we are creating a segment of our population that's going to be perpetually stuck in these extended stays.
Wow.
We've created programs, especially in Norcross, with United Way and St. Vincent de Paul, and we're slowly moving these families out. But, we're really treating a symptom, even though it means the world for these families who receive the assistance and get into permanent housing. We're just treating a symptom. And the reason for that is just a housing inaffordability. They cannot compete with somebody who comes in and says, I'll prepay the first 6 months.
Exactly.
We've even offered landlord incentives and up to $1,500 if you house our family, and we'll, pay the rent for the first 2-3 months.
Right.
And these are all families who work, but they would not even look at our clients.
That's amazing.
So I do worry that they're perpetually stuck, and I do worry long-term effect on the children, on their education. They go in and out of different extended stays, the safety, there are murders. We pull the crime statistics, and vast majority, at least for the Norcross area, vast majority of the clients that we've interviewed and served are people of color. 49% of them had children, and 30% of them were elderly. Wow. So it just absolutely, so they're basically using it as single room occupancy. And for some of the seniors, it was fine. It was, because it's a small room, it covers the utilities. But when we were doing the interviews, they were about $900 a month. Now those rooms cost about $1,500-$1,600.
Goodness gracious.
It is absolutely. So yes, there is a whole segment of our population that is one day away for literal homelessness because they don't have the protections that we have in the apartments.
That is stunning, Laila. That's so heartbreaking.
I
guarantee you the majority of citizens anywhere, but probably particularly in Norcross, have no idea that that's going on.
They did not. And we have received so many other jurisdictions reaching out to us to duplicate the surveys, and they have. But it got national attention because, like I said, it's a symptom of, I don't want to say just suburbanization of poverty, but it's all of the focus traditionally is in the urban core. And in the suburbs, Gwinnett has the highest median rents in the metro Atlanta, and people don't realize that.
I did not know that at all.
Absolutely. Highest median rents, higher than Cobb, DeKalb, City of Atlanta, and Fulton. And it's just, I don't see it getting any better.
Well, and again, according to forecasters, it's going to go up at least another 5 to 8% this year. Wow. That is wild.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So I guess then you're absolutely right, where it has to be a multi-pronged approach to address these challenges. I'm trying to figure out how do we start talking about or getting advocates to introduce new ideas related to policy? Because when I think of policy, I literally just think of people, because policy is made by people for people, right? So how do we, because yes, regardless of the amount of fundraising you could do, private or public partnerships you can do, it's not going to necessarily change a framework, right? So I think for me, it's trying to figure out what kind of policy changes need to be in place on a, on a city level and a county jurisdiction, federally. What would help to start alleviating some of these challenges from that lens?
Several fronts. For example, in Gwinnett County is the second most populous county in the state. We don't have any county funded housing initiatives. And now the new commission is absolutely looking at that. They just concluded their study. What we have presented to them is a housing opportunity bond. And what this would do is, just like the bond that was used, for example, to purchase the Mall of Georgia for $35 million, a $50 million bond could create thousands of units. And we demonstrated how we could leverage it, not just us, but any affordable housing developer, nonprofit and private, 12-1. We can bring in additional $600 million to leverage the $50 million that the county would put up over the next 10 years to develop rental and home ownership units. So definitely we need to see some kind of an investment, financial investment from the county, but on the premise that it does need to be leveraged with outside funding.
Sure.
That would have an impact. And we looked at our tax specialist, bond specialist. It would affect the county's operating budget by 0.17%. negligent. So that's absolutely. So that the debt service on that 15 minutes.
Yes.
So another one is really advocacy. For example, a lot of the House people in the extended stays, they don't know that, and even the Georgia Attorney General has ruled during the pandemic, partly because of our study raised awareness on how many people live in extended stays.
Right.
There needs to be more advocacy in the education that those families, if they're long-term residents in extended stays, they are covered, protected by the Georgia landlord-tenant law. So instead of being locked out after missing a single night of payment, they actually have a right to go through the eviction process. And this has been adjudicated in DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Cobb, where that was upheld. Third is to look at the zoning. And I know Gwinnett County is also studying to make it more inclusive and to encourage more diverse types of housing options.
Right.
Like you've mentioned before, having two households sharing the same home on a single title. We have, as a subdivision, not just Gwinnett, but majority of the subdivisions, you typically have single family homes and multifamily. And there's so much in the middle that could really work. Kind of the pad split model, that's your modern type boarding home, but it's much more better regulated. It's much more transparent. And it does offer that. It's not for everybody, but again, it offers one segment of the population a housing option.
Yeah.
So there are definitely things that we can be doing, looking at just some of the regulatory burden that is placed on affordable housing. And this has to be addressed at the federal and the state level. With the low-income housing tax credit units, we've estimated that just the compliance with some of the state regulations adds an additional $50,000 in cost per unit. Then it would be developed by a private sector, unregulated. So not only do we have to keep these units affordable, right? But now it costs more to develop an affordable unit.
Correct.
And there are ways. We need to collectively need to build consensus about it. And I think in terms of educating public in general, there is still a lot of NIMBYism, not in my backyard, still reluctance even for the apartments. Word Section 8 gets thrown out a lot. People don't even know what Section 8 is.
Could you take a detour for us and explain that and how that relates to the idea of affordable housing? Because I think when people hear that, they immediately create some kind of narrative in their head that is probably not accurate. Correct.
Section 8 is a housing choice voucher that is given to a family to seek an apartment or a rental housing unit. And they have to find a landlord that is willing to take the voucher. And the voucher subsidizes the rent. So the family pays what their ability to pay, 30% of their income. Again, the working poor, if you're getting paid $10 an hour, that you're not going to be able to afford an apartment for $1,500 a month. You're just not going to happen. So you're making $1,600 a month, and the apartment is $1,500. So the federal government just offers a subsidy month to month. That's all it is. But the word, I don't know, I think it brings a lot of negative feelings about the people who use the Section 8 vouchers. But again, it's important to realize this is to provide stability for the children. It is to so they can attend school. It also serves a lot of seniors, and it serves a lot of our workforce, people who provide services to us daily basis, whom, as we've seen with the pandemic, are essential workers.
Exactly.
Those are the families who benefit from these programs. So yes, Section 8, and in Gwinnett County, there are maybe about 2,500 to 3,000 Section 8 vouchers. So we're not even talking huge numbers.
Yeah, it's not a massive sector of the population. And so I think debunking these myths and really providing clear understanding of how that benefits an individual and their family, and how that again speaks towards that integration of a community, which is so very important. And really making sure that there is a sense of looking out for everyone around you, because you're taking, but you're not willing to give, right? Absolutely. It's that idea of my for and no more, right?
Well, home ownership when we do the taxes, we all get the write-offs, right, for the property taxes that we pay and the interest on the mortgage as homeowners. That is considered a subsidy. So homeowners really
exactly
don't
we're
look at
getting it too
that way. It is a subsidy, and it's actually the largest subsidy. It's higher in terms of dollars than any of the subsidy for affordable housing for low-income families. So the middle class and upper middle class are receiving a larger subsidy in form of tax credits than the low-income households.
I've never thought about it that way.
Yes.
Laila, that's incredible. I'm going to use that because that's wow. And you talk about creating perspective and finding a way to, it's not leveling the playing field in terms of access, but in terms of, we are kind of all in this together, just at different points along the journey. Right. Absolutely. And I am not different than my neighbor.
Yes.
That's powerful. Thank you.
And I just wanted to share a story of one of the first transitional housing program unit that we have created in Gwinnett County. There was pushback because, again, some of the stigma. And our approach in acquiring these units, we were very intentional about it being a scattered site approach. We don't want everybody clustered in one place. And that's for multiple reasons. We wanted these families to live in typical middle-class families with equal access to resources and opportunities. We don't want the stigma attached to living in a subsidized unit.
Right.
So we did receive some pushback, but thankfully, the county really finally realized that the benefit. And the very first family that we took in was a single mom with 2 children, and they referred to us from Family Promise, and they serve homeless families. And she has allowed us to share this story. She became homeless after her middle child died.
Wow.
She lost her child to cancer. She became depressed, unsurprisingly, and lost her job subsequently. And then the housing, and she ended up homeless. We put her in our transitional housing program where the rents were capped. And we had a conversation. She worked in the daycare at $11 an hour. And we said, Dorothy, you can stay here for 2 years. You can take all of the classes, financial literacy, budgeting classes you want, pay off the debt. But at $11 an hour, you're not going to be able to support your family. So while in that program, because the rent was so affordable, we partnered with Gwinnett Tech, their Workforce Investment Act. She enrolled in that program. She was able to do that program accelerated because the rent was affordable, so she could cut her hours down. She got her associates in 18 months. She was able to go from homeless to home, but after she got her associates, she doubled her income.
Wow.
Doubled her income in 18 months. And then we let her stay for a few more months to save. She went from homeless to homeowner in 2 years.
That's incredible.
All we did, and she did all the work. All we did is just provided that stable housing for those 2 years, and I get goosebumps about it, for 2 years, so that she can get these things going. And she started working for St. Jude's Hospital and as a surgical technician. Now that she's a homeowner, she has about $80,000 worth of equity in her home.
Incredible.
And she's going self-financing now. She's going to be a registered nurse, so she's going taking those classes. So just the impact on not just her, but her children.
Yes.
And then the impact on the overall economy. She went from somebody who utilized the services to now being a homeowner and adding to her, career. We've had residents whom we've just opened the doors to contracting, for example.
Yeah. And
some of our residents went from public housing to moving out into the private sector, creating jobs and employing people.
I love it.
And again, being from consumers of these public programs to job creators. And that's what I need always for us to think about. This is not a handout. We are truly investing in our neighbors and by extension in our community.
Oh my gosh.
That's why I love what I do.
Preached a word, Laila, preached a word. That is so, but it's so deeply inspiring to me because that's the kind of mentality that I want the general public to gear into and to really pay attention to, because I think it's very, we live in such a convenient society where we can compartmentalize the world.
Yes.
And I'm just sort of keeping my nose down and I'm doing my thing and I'm not going to look to my left or my right because I don't want to, I don't want to get involved, or and I don't even think it's people consciously saying I don't care, but the simple act of not pursuing how can I do better with my neighbors becomes the action of not caring.
Yeah.
Right? Whether you've chosen it or not, you actually did make a choice by not engaging. So
Absolutely.
This is such rich, robust information that I can't wait for people to hear, because my hope is that it's going to not just, make somebody feel good, but say, wait a minute, how can I get involved in that? Or how can I find programs that support that? How can I advocate for legislation that supports that? So when I go to the polls, whenever these kinds of referendums are up for a vote, or whether it's a particular policy or whatever, I can let my voice be heard. If there are gatherings or hearings on things or public meetings, it is incumbent upon me to be involved. It's not, like you said, it affects everybody. It affects everybody. So you can be the flamingo with your head in the sand if you want to, but the truth is, we are all connected. We are all in that shared space. So I'm just so delighted and heartened to know that you are leading the charge in this work in Gwinnett. And I have to believe it's having ripple effects across the Metro Atlanta area. And I am now eager to go take a look at that research, and I will make sure that I link it in the show notes for this. And we have a resource page for patrons. I'm going to link to all of that great stuff as well, because I would love for people to continue to get educated. And to, for me, it's not so much about awareness is one thing, but awareness doesn't create change. Awareness needs a mindset shift. And then after that, you need behavioral shift. And until we can get to a point as a collective society where there's behavioral shift, then we're never going to solve any of these problems. I think that's what we're trying to aim to do with these conversations. So we'll go ahead and wrap up. I'm so grateful for your time and your energy.
My pleasure. I enjoyed this conversation.
Incredibly, I'm going to say effervescent. There's like a light about you, and the ease at which you are able to communicate these realities and challenges, and even layer it all with hope it's very inspiring. So thank you so much for joining us. Patrons, thanks so much for joining us for our final episode of Housing, a Gothic Tale. I will make sure that all this information is linked in the show notes and on the resource page. We couldn't do it without you. Hopefully you are seeing the show before it closes on February 6th so this Sunday is your last opportunity to see Feeding Beatrice. But these things that we've talked about both today and in these previous conversations, they are ongoing. They are very present and real challenges for so many of us. So take it upon yourself to get educated and to get involved and figure out how you can become a resource and a help to those around you. So thank you, Laila, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aurora Theatre, for your opportunity to partner. I'm Justin with the Welcome Home Atlanta team, powered by Keller Williams First Atlanta. We hope to see you at the theater, or we'll see you in the digital space. All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.